Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Reiki Women podcast, an ongoing conversation about the ways in which the system of Reiki is alive in our lives between myself, Michaela Daystar of Heartscapes Reiki, Bronwen Logan of Reiki with Bronwen, and Carrie Varela of the Reiki Healing Society. And we are circling in this week around just some energies that are in our communities, in the field, on social media, maybe in our own selves, that really is inviting us to work with the system of Reiki around. And that is the presence of difficult times in the lives of a lot of people in our lives. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's some heavy things going on in the world that, even if we're not consciously focused on it, can absolutely impact the way that we feel. Here on our side of the hemisphere, we are heading from fall into winter, and this is a time of year that can bring some heaviness for folks. I myself tend to suffer from seasonal affectiveness disorder, so in the winter times, I can get those winter blues. And then this is also a time of year when we can experience a greater percentage of loss, more reflection on loss, on death, on grief. These types of energies just tend to be in the air in the fall and winter season. But even on your side of the world, Bronwyn, I would imagine that there are times when things begin to feel emotionally heavy, when things are just hard in people's lives. And for whatever reason, we sometimes see these periods of time where there's just a lot of folks who are struggling. And in those times, I know I am really grateful to have the system of Reiki alongside walking that path with me. And we just thought it would be a good time to address the value and the practical application of Reiki when we are in a time that just feels hard. And so I'd love to just open it up to you, Bronwyn, and ask, firstly, in the general sense, if there's ways in which the system of Reiki has specifically impacted you when times have been hard, or that you've seen it at work with other people.
Well, I think our perspective on life is probably, what sits at the foundation of how we think about our lives is something that for me has made a difference and has had an enormous shift from when I was younger to where I am now. So that different perspective of thinking about who I am and how I sit in the world and what goes on around me, that means that I can draw on the ideas that for me sit at the foundation of the system of Reiki. So the precepts, obviously, they have been something that, very slowly worked their way into my life, and I feel like I absorb them, if you like, and so that they're there, and they are always being a support for me. If I were to start with that idea of that, then I would pick from the very beginning of the precepts, the for today only, and know how incredibly important that is. Recently, I've been doing, because actually a lot of people have been sort of contacting me, and I've been talking to people about the stresses that are apparent at the moment in this world. I mean, it's very hard to know if it's more or less or what, but it feels a bit heavy at the moment when I'm talking to people and their experiences, and just dealing with things like, I think you were just saying that, Michaela, social media or the news that we are getting, and how it can be quite overwhelming. So how we deal with that and how we use the system of Reiki to help ourselves with that. And I think that for today only is this really beautiful like pulling us into this moment and saying it's okay. So I've been working with a couple of Japanese phrases that reflect for today only, and I found them incredibly helpful. So one of them is mono no aware, which is the exquisite feeling of feelings that we have when we realize that something is just fleeting, and that there's like a nostalgia for each moment that we have. And it's not judging that moment, saying that the moment is good or bad, but it's just saying that that feeling that of this is it, we never have that moment again, and that is a really precious feeling. And knowing that means that nothing stays the same, and we can say that to ourselves, but once again, it's that, how do we absorb that feeling? How do we make it a part of our lives? And for me, contemplation of these phrases really helps. So mono no aware, you can look that one up. It's a really interesting one, and because it's just like all this pleasure in the idea of that this is it right now, and now it's gone. And we need to love that moment so much, because it is just it's all we have. And similar to that is ichigo ichie, which quite interestingly, I was talking to a friend of mine who went to a Shigendo weekend in the US. And that's unusual because there hasn't been a lot of Shigendo work in the US, and it's just starting to come across. And Mikao Usui, the founder of the system of Reiki, was most likely a Shigendo practitioner. And that brought together different elements of, Buddhism, Shintoism, various forms of Buddhism. So, and she said that this highly revered teacher gave a talk on Ichigo Ichie at this Shigendo weekend, which I thought was wonderful because it really relates to for today only. Ichigo Ichie is what's a direct translation? I don't know if I've got one written down. Oh, I have. Once in a lifetime. Yeah, so so it's once in a lifetime. What else have we got? Each moment is unique. So it's very similar to mono no aware, but mono no aware is more about the exquisiteness of something, where Ichigo Ichie is very much about the feelings of gratitude that we have for each moment. And it actually evolved from the tea ceremony in Japan. And when two people would come together and practice tea ceremony, which is a highly ritualized practice, then in that practice, even though it's a ritual, which you would think would be the same thing each time, the appreciation of the uniqueness of each of those moments and the preciousness of being together in that moment together and expressing gratitude for that moment. Once again, not saying the moment is good or bad. And I think this is where people tend to get hung up, right? So if we are looking at for today only, so just now, nothing else, it really doesn't matter what is happening. It's the fact that something is happening and we are here and we're here together. And just the unique recognition of feeling that in our minds, in our bodies, in our hearts is very, it's overwhelming. And that's when the gratitude really comes up for each of these precious moments that we get to spend together here on this planet. One other thing about that, I just made me think of looking at you, Michaela, there. I saw a documentary on the Dalai Lama and Reverend Tutu, Desmond Tutu, yeah? And because I know you work with the Book of Joy, and there is a documentary about the Book of Joy with those two, talking to them about how they came to put it together. And they talk about, in that documentary, they were talking about the feelings of joy that they get by just being there together in that moment, and it's this sharing that we recognize of being together, and allowing those moments to just infuse us and know that this is all we've got. And right now, this is it. We don't have anything else but this, where we are right now in this moment. And that is, it brings, if we can really experience that, it can help us to let go of feelings of overwhelm, because all we have is right now. All the other stuff, the past, present, future, doesn't mean anything. It's just this. And it allows us just to release the other things and to experience fully and be present with one another. So for me, that is probably, one of the most important perspectives that we can absorb and hold in our body and experience to move through life without holding on to our pains and our worries.
That's beautiful. What comes up for you, Carrie?
Well, I gotta say that right now in my life, it's not that I don't relate to this. It's just that I'm living. What's the word? Isha. What was the
Ichigo,
last?
Ichie. Ichigo, Ichie.
I'm living an Ichigo Ichie epoch in my life right now. My kids are in kindergarten, and I don't know how many kindergartners you know, but they're pretty happy people, and they're actually like just beacons of joy. And I have two of them in my life right now. My daughter's in transitional kindergarten, which is like the year before kindergarten. My other kiddo is in kindergarten. So, one of the things that I know that I've been really leaning into, even in times of distress and pain in the world, and even my own pain, is that I get to cuddle up with a little kid at the end of every day, and experience exactly what you're talking about, when it's just this incredible, exquisite feeling of like how precious and beautiful this is, how once in a lifetime it is, and it's fleeting, and it's not always going to be there. And as Michaela probably knows, at some point your kids grow up and they become moody teenagers and they don't cuddle with you anymore or whatever. I'm fully aware that will happen at some day, or they'll fly the nest and all of those things. But I'm not living that in this moment. But I have that kind of subtle awareness, right? So I recognize that for my future self. I know that's a little outside of what you're talking about, Bronwen, but for my future self, that there will be work to do, right? To kind of reclaim that joy, just that day to day, the goodness of every day, it feels like it's overflowing and abundant for me right now. So I'm fairly grateful for that. I'm grateful for that, but also trying as hard as I can to be present to it. Nevertheless, there are challenges in my life, and there's certainly challenges in the world, and things happening like really just out of a scale of 1 to 10, 10 out of 10 being the worst thing that could ever happen in your life. That's happening for some of my friends, some of my close friends, terminal illness, war in a place that has a lot of significance to my family. My husband's Jewish, and so I feel that turmoil and unrest, and I think the reason why we feel it is because we're connected to everything that is. So we are the microcosm of the macrocosm, and so what's happening in the world, we can feel, we can sense, we can breathe into in our own body as well. And so when things are happening in the world like that, I think it's really helpful to do a daily practice or something that really helps us connect to a deeper truth of the mystery of life and death, of what we're doing here on earth. I see a lot of violence in television and the things that we watch. Honestly, even in my children's kids shows, there's violence in that. And we live in, at least in my world, I think elsewhere as well, but very violent culture. Every weekend there's mass shootings. I had a friend die in a mass shooting, and there's a helplessness that surrounds me with that. And sometimes it's easy to just kind of numb it out because I don't know what to do with it, you know? But I think what it ultimately invokes inside me is a fear. And so I think sitting with that fear and sitting next to it as a friend, not necessarily sitting with it to the intention to just make it go away for any, you know, with any, I can't come up with the right word, but just like, you know, like being like, I'm going to sit next to you so you can go away now because I don't want to feel this fear. It's really of like a self-acceptance of like letting, that fragility of those fleeting moments in life, even our happiness, our joys, and also our sorrows, to feel that. And I think in the midst of that, what we find is this kind of sacred and poetic tenderness of life. And so even in our really painful moments, it's there.
Yeah.
And I think of that for my friend whose sister's dying from cancer right now. And there's just this tender, beautiful and sacred relationship and connection that's there in these last moments of her life, and that will be with her, I think, for the rest of my friend's life, you know, a beautiful spiritual connection. So I gotta admit, I don't feel like I'm doing a whole lot to help heal the world right now or to sit with the emotional pain of the world. Well, what I am trying to do is put up my blinders on at least a little bit so that I can get my work done and I can do what I'm here to do and I can still sit and work and be and offer the things that I have to offer the world with kind of this fierce love and not let all of this external noise distract me from that process. It's very hard. There's plenty of weeks where I get stuck in that place and then just come back to it again and again, not knowing, you know, the full impact of what I have to offer, what I share to the world, just hoping that it's positive. I'm probably going a little makeup free today. I have a little lipstick on, but there's a reason for that. I've actually, for the last few weeks, it's been going on for a while now. I decided to get LASIK and permanently correct my vision, which it's a little anti-hippie, and I'm a hippie. And so I've been struggling with a lot of feelings about that. But ultimately, I collect a massive amount of plastic waste every year for my contacts. And every year my contacts and my glasses and everything, they cost me so much money. And so this whole notion of being able to see the stars at night while I'm camping was kind of this vision that I followed. And so less than 5 days ago, I went under the gun and they took a surface of my eyes off and burned my eyes with this laser. I hope I'm not traumatizing anybody, but you know, then they're like, okay, you're going to need a day to recover. And truthfully, the day to recover was like to be locked in a hotel room, shades drawn, patches over my eyes, or like sunglasses on my eyes, and I was in so much pain that it was just like I had to keep my eyes closed, and then every once in a while I like open my eyes, let like gobs of tears rush out, close them again, and these like waves of pain kept like hitting me. They hit one eye, then the other. This went on for like 8 hours, right? And it was so intense. And I'm so grateful that I had a practice like Reiki to help center me in that and not to like kind of lose myself in these waves of pain that we're moving through. But actually, for me, the appreciation, there's this tremendous appreciation for my eyes, like my eyes doing all this. And then also the healing, you know, my body recognizing there's something that needs to be healing right now. And the resources and like the sensations, the energy that put into my eyes, my body, just natural intelligence is really mind blowing. And I like feeling that and kind of being inside of those sensations in my own body. It's awakening. It's like, it helped me feel more alive. Right. And like, so by the end of this 8-hour cycle or so, it started to lessen and started to get better. And then every day thereafter has been a lot better. And now I'm like waking up in the morning with like clear vision and getting used to this whole process of like not having all this plastic waste in my life and all the things. And yeah, I'm left with this incredible sense of gratitude. But So what I can say for those who are struggling or in a hard time, maybe it's like this kind of immediate hard time that's happening for you, or there's other periods of our time where it's like 5, 6, 7 years of really struggling through something and having it be there and feeling stuck inside of it is really similar to what you said, Bronwyn. I don't have the words in Japanese, but this whole idea of this too will pass.
Yeah.
And to know that, and it's not easy, right? But to know that life is changing and transforming all the time. And so how can we sit and transform it, be more intentional about it, but also how can we appreciate the healing? Like, even in those painful moments where, I'm having eye surgery and it's just like incredible pain waves moving through my body, there's also this gratitude because I'm like, this is healing. This is my body healing itself. And so even in those dark times, finding those things that you can appreciate is one of the things that's just always been and always will be a foundation, a go-to for me. So I know, Michaela, you've been very patient waiting to share your perspectives and insights. So I love to
I'm really
pass it.
enjoying listening to both of you. It's when we have a topic like this that's so wide ranging, it's always really interesting to see, what comes forward and how it gets woven together. Even having a topic as broad and big and, potentially heavy as like waves of suffering or distress or difficulty, that we're observing in others and perhaps in our own lives, can be a lot to take on in a less than an hour conversation. But, as always, these conversations give us a chance to have an initial experience with an idea, to circle back to things that have had heart and meaning for us in the past, and hopefully that will connect with things that have heart and meaning for those of you who are listening. And so just kind of tracking a few of the things that you two have mentioned. I love, Bronwyn, that you began with this idea of perspective, and the idea of Reiki being a methodology that helps to shift our perspective in a variety of ways. And we've talked about that, in the context of other conversations. And it's absolutely important in this one as well. Just kind of beginning, with my own experience. I mentioned, kind of going into the winter season and having the experience of winter depression or seasonal affectiveness disorder. And for me, a lot of times the way that shows up is this like constriction of perspective, this like drawing in of like feeling really bad, feeling really, whatever, like the deepest, saddest things that are, alive at the time, like come right in the forefront of my attention. And, that feeling, that despairing feeling of like, this is how it will always be, right? And not being able to touch that idea, Carrie, that you mentioned of this too will pass. It's like, nope, this is not going to pass. This is just how it's going to be from now on. And, I'm just kind of getting smaller and smaller and smaller and constricting around that feeling. And in the past, when I haven't really understood what was happening physiologically, biologically with, the shift in our biology when the seasons change sometimes, and not having, a practice that could help to intercede in that experience, it could, there's been years when it was just a truly miserable time that truly did feel like it was just not going to end. And there are many experiences like that in life where, for whatever reason, for whatever stimulus is happening, either inside of ourselves or in the world or in our relationships, in our immediate experience, there's this constriction and this feeling of getting smaller and like concentrating around the distress or around the source of the distress. And that can really, lock us into that feeling of it's not going to change. And a real difficulty seeing pathways that actually are available to us to help to relieve that condition. Even knowing all of this, there's been times when I didn't get on the front end of it, and like that feeling of constriction kind of came over me before I'd kind of provisioned myself with my practice. And in those times, it's really hard to get back into practice. It's really difficult. Like, even if I know in my mind, yes, if I sit with Joshin Kokyoho, or if I chant with the precepts, or if I go outside and like just be with nature, any of the other many practices that are simple and accessible and super effective that I know are there, it can be really, really difficult to actually reach for them in that moment. And so, part of, I think, why we wanted to have this conversation is to remind maybe ourselves first and foremost, and then, those of us in conversation with us, or those who are listening, to really like prime ourselves by practicing when we have the mental space to do it. Because that feeling of despair can shrink our ability to recognize that there's anything else. You mentioned the Book of Joy earlier, Bronwen. One of the chapters in there, part of that book walks through the 8 pillars of joy and the 8 obstacles to joy. And one of the obstacles is despair. And it's that feeling of hopelessness, that feeling of everything is so wrong with the world. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm just tiny. I'm just one person. I can't fix anything for anybody. There's no reason to hope. There's apathy is just right there on the edge, which is like stepping into just that disconnection from what's happening when it gets to be too overwhelming. And, there's another, the other aspect of despair that can be present is this feeling of like, what right do I have to reach for joy and peace and spaciousness when there is so much suffering in the world? And there's almost this like, I have to be in the suffering also because I can't fix it. And I don't know if any of that resonates for anybody out there, but I've certainly gone through those kinds of feelings before, either in response to things going on in the world or in my own life. And what I'm, consciously in this time, in the season of fall, before winter has come in, when I can feel the little tickles of that sadness, like on the edge coming through, it's like, now is the time to really build that reserve of spaciousness, of groundedness, of connection, of reminding my body, my physiology, as well as my heart, my mind, my spirit, that this too shall pass, that this moment is exactly what I have. And sometimes this moment feels like pain and despair. And that's okay, right? We actually can make enough room inside of ourselves to be with whatever we're feeling. We've talked about that before, the aspect of Reiki that causes us to feel like there's more space inside, that there's enough room to hold whatever it is we're experiencing. And that can help us stay in the moment, right? To not try to escape to the past or dwell on the future or worry about those things, but to just be here with whatever it is that I'm feeling. Sometimes what I'm feeling in this moment is really, really bad, right? But to put some space around that, to bring compassion in, to bring gratitude in, to not be so attached to my fears about what's happening, my anger about what's happening, to put room around it, so that we can be in the present moment when the present moment is really hard. There's a really powerful and valuable image that gets circulated online, different variations on it. I cannot remember the origin of this concept or this image. I'll try to find it for us, but it's basically depicting the experience of moving through grief and sharing the idea that the grief itself doesn't get smaller or go away, but we can get bigger around it. And the image is a series of jars. And in the top series, you've got a jar that stays the same size and it's holding this ball of grief. And over time, the ball gets smaller and smaller and smaller inside of the jar. And it's saying that's not actually how we generally experience grief or suffering or, maybe even despair. How it actually works inside of our system is that the grief is what it is. the pain, the situation, the conditions out in the world that we can't necessarily impact, or that we have a tiny little piece of impact we can share. Those things are going to be what they are, but we ourselves, as the container, as the jar, have control, or we have some influence over feeling bigger, more spacious, enough room to make space for that grief, for that distress, for that despair, but also for joy, also for perspective, also for remembering that change is constant, and therefore this too will in fact pass. And perhaps it's going to pass because we're going to pass, right? I mean, maybe it's going to pass because the situation is going to, resolve badly. Like, we can't control how it will pass, but it will in fact pass. And, being able to hold change as a comfort, even when so often change provokes anxiety for us, is a really, really radical aspect of being with the system of Reiki. The last piece that I wanted to mention around the idea of perspective, and the idea of being able, like, enabling ourselves to take action when we're in that despairing place. That action might be getting therapy. That action might be getting support from other people, reaching out. It might look like getting medication. It might look like taking some political action. That what we enable ourselves to do can look a lot of different ways. And the system of Reiki can give us a lot of tools and empowerment for that. And one of that can be perhaps seeing the pathway that's right for us, that perhaps we haven't considered, or that we haven't wanted to take. So I just wanted to name that there are many, many things that we may need to bring in to help us deal with a truly difficult time. And Reiki can be the methodology that helps us to accept and to see and to envision and to take action on whatever those next steps are for us. So I just wanted to include that.
Yeah, very much so. And I would say in that, I was thinking about, just as we've been talking, that the very fundamental idea, we're so lucky with the system of Reiki that we can bring it down to very basic fundamental ideas. And one of them is just to breathe. It really sits at the foundation of our practice, and acknowledging the breath, being in the moment with the breath, and sitting with the breath, just that also bringing us into this exact moment. And knowing, you just sort of named that, Michaela, but knowing that that change is not fear. And I think that these phrases that I have been looking at, so if we look at the exquisiteness of the moment, there's no fear in that. It's just saying this is precious, yeah, and there's going to be another precious moment, and another precious moment, and another precious moment, and that is life. And there is no space in many ways for fear within that. Though I did like, Carrie, you're talking about sitting with fear as a friend. And I think that thing of getting to know your friend, we want to get to know our friends. So getting to know what our fear is. And when we delve deeper into that, then that fear possibly transforms, because we see what's in that fear, where it's coming from, why it's there. When we talk to it, when we make friends with it. So allowing it the opportunity to shift and change. I was thinking also about on a big, if we were looking at this in a big picture, what is it that we need in life to help us to move through? And if I look at young children, which we all are to some degree, because we've all been that, and it all sits inside of us, that what did we need when we were little? And, from having a child, it seemed to me my child needed routine. And, we talk about ritual, and doing the same things, and like I said, they're always going to be different anyway, but knowing that we're safe, that we have these things that we can hold on to, and that is what a practice can give us. So knowing that that's there, that we can do the same thing every time, even if it is just acknowledging the breath and using that as a routine. When times are difficult, when, as you say, Michaela, going into, if you're going into something and you're not ready for it, and you start to feel strange and, unhappy in yourself, acknowledging the breath, sitting with the breath, acknowledging that, allowing that to be the moment. There are lots of ways that we can use the system of Reiki without it being just a very strict thing like this. We can take aspects of that and allow it to be there for us. But yes, finding some form of routine or ritual practice that we can keep to have for ourselves as this special time for ourselves is something which is going to be a support, because a teacher can help us in many ways, but they can't do it for us. So we have to do it ourselves. So what is it that we're going to do for ourselves? What can you do for yourself? Yeah.
I love all of that, how we're coming to this moment in the conversation, because I feel like this is really kind of at the heart of it. If we sit with our fear, like you were talking about, Bronwen, and really make friends with it, at some point you begin to recognize there is some part of me that needs something, and then I can recognize what that part of me needs, and then maybe be more resourced to actually go out and get that need. And maybe sometimes it's not even possible to do that, so it's just about acknowledging that need, and continuing to acknowledge it until you can kind of tip the bucket over into a place where you can get your needs met in a more healthy way. It's not easy. It's not easy as women, I think, as well. There's kind of this extra cultural and societal baggage that we hold there. One of the reasons why I feel like that word master in relationship with Reiki is it can be really problematic, exactly for what we're talking about here, is that if we believe ourselves to be master of none or master of everything, or just kind of equate with this whole idea, we lose our beginner's mind, and we create a kind of fragility, a rigidness around getting help, the help that we need.
Yeah.
And that mindset, it can be very subconscious. It can really kind of slide into places where you don't realize it. And I recognize when I kind of got rid of that term as a way of relating to my practice in life, like I could be a little bit more humble, a little bit more fluid, and a little bit, more aware of my beginner's mind, and really seeking to cultivate that beginner's mind. So even if I have done a Reiki precept meditation 1,008 times, that I can still come to it on that 1,009th and have that openness to receive really what that practice had for me that day in that moment. And to me, just that whole terminology around Reiki Master, you sometimes lose that flexibility. It's something that I've always just really wanted to retain for myself. But also, it's an important part of this conversation is like a feeling like we can't reach out and get help. And I feel like healers, we need a lot of help. We do. I mean, and not like more so than other people, because we're not just holding our own pain and suffering, we're working with other people as well. And so I think to be really well resourced as a healer is to, be more aware of how you can get your own needs met, how you can help yourself. And in that process, you can help many other people too. But if we neglect that part of ourselves as getting our own needs met, then a lot of times we come into energy imbalances, boundary issues, and all kinds of different things can show up for us. So yeah, creating a little bit more, freedom that it's part of the process to reach out to other people, to get Reiki from other people, other practitioners, to seek out different forms of help. And I love how you were saying, and first of all, also, Michaela, I really appreciate all the words you put around these kind of dark feelings, and sharing so much of your practice and your own experiences. I think all of us, I can certainly relate to all of those things that you were saying, and put the words to feelings and emotions. It's kind of hard to do that sometimes, but um, is that, like, for me right now, really at the heart of wherever I'm suffering, wherever the hardness, the harshness of life is hitting me, is I'm really trying to lean into what either can I do about it, or how I can support myself through it. And sometimes the answer is like totally accessible. You might think it's like something that's so out of your reach, but actually it's not. And I've just been looking back on my last 5 years or so being a mom, and one of the things that's really impacted me is not having daily exercise, because that was just kind of part of my life as a fitness instructor. It was absolutely something that supported my mental health, my emotional health, just everything in my life was better when I have time to exercise every day. And so lately I've been really recommitting to that, and I've had the time for it. And I've like looked back with hindsight and realized that was what was missing, and if I had just been able to really recognize and acknowledge that. And there were many years in that cycle where, daily exercise was really hard to come by during the pandemic and all of those things, but it's really good to have it back, and so sometimes those things that we really need in our life, they kind of get pushed away, but they do come back. It's kind of that cyclical nature. So.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And that idea that we can always start again, right? To beginner's mind, we can always begin again, and I've definitely felt that despair of like, oh, I used to have this, I used to do this, and now I don't, and it's gone, like, but you can begin again, I love that. And I love the introduction of the idea of ritual into this conversation, Bronwyn. We're always just so like just on point with each other around these conversations. Just in my class on Sunday, we really were deep diving into the art of spontaneous ritual as part of our Reiki practice, and regarding our Reiki practice as ritual for a lot of the reasons that you've named, to give, on the one hand, some structure, some bones, to help us to focus our attention on the moment, to confer significance on this moment, on what is happening right now, on how I'm feeling right now, to put a little bit of structure, some beginning, middle, and end onto navigating this moment, whether it's in our Reiki practice or, some emotion that's arisen. We do this in class if somebody, has something emotional come up, or there's some insight that comes and it feels like it could either derail the class, or like, the temptation might be to kind of hurry past it. We always consciously like pause and just feel into what is needed to acknowledge this moment, to move through it, to kind of go through an arc of acknowledging and being with it, draw whatever lessons are in that for our group in the moment, and then to close it, to close that moment so we can move on into the next moment. And ritual does that for us while allowing a great deal of flexibility, as you said. Not that a ritual can or should be the same every time, but it's got bones that are consistent, that can be relied upon, that we've internalized well enough that we don't have to design it, new every time. And at the same time, and they're very responsive, right? They can be very responsive to the moment. And, within the system of Reiki, we have so many different practices and, ways that we can respond to a given moment. And it's really like, okay, what in this moment is going to serve the needs of the moment, and then bringing that to bear. And just like having that perspective on life, that like we have all kinds of moments that are repeated, routines that are repeated, but can we hold a space of ritual around those routines where we really focus on what we are doing in that moment? We're really present to what is happening and using that as a space to bring more spaciousness, to slow things down a little bit, which is a little paradoxical, what I was saying before, right? Where we're feeling like, oh, we're stuck in the despair and the pain. And it's like, oh, we want to slow that down. We want to take more time there. But, so often we're so keen to rush through whatever the difficult thing is, the distracting thing, the uncomfortable thing, so we can get to the other side of it, that we're not actually in the gift of that moment, right? In, as you were saying, that preciousness of that time, even if that moment has pain associated with it. When we slow things down and we put a little bit of support and structure around it, which could be the ritual of a therapy session, it could be the ritual of, any number of ways that we can be with the moment, we slow it down, oftentimes we can find those moments of preciousness, of gratitude, of joy that are present even in that painful moment. And it just helps us to be with it better, to be with ourselves inside of it better, to perhaps have less need to numb out to whatever it is that's happening, but to be able to be with it. And, again, to know what the next right step is for us, which can include a lot of different types of interventions. And then just finally, this piece, this simple, beautiful, exquisite piece around the breath, and that we can always come to that as the starting point of any ritual, of any practice. I was just sitting with a good friend yesterday who's, was sharing just a really, really horrible time that he's having right now, that just, he's in so much pain about, and so much constriction. And at some point he said, God, I just can't breathe. Like I just, like for these past few days, I just can't get a breath. And, I was like, we're just gonna, I don't even think I said it. I think we just sat and I just went into my breath and I put my hand on my belly and we just breathed together for a while. And, there was a small shift that happened for him. It's like I was kind of watching him. I could tell the breath was coming a little lower in the body, coming down from the chest and into his belly a little bit more. And there was just this small bit of relief that happened. And, I wasn't doing a Reiki session. I wasn't guiding him in anything. We were just together paying attention to, number one, the fact that he couldn't breathe. And then number two, the fact that we were breathing. We were together and we were breathing in that moment. And it's just so powerful how much of an impact that has on our physiology, on therefore our emotions, our thoughts, our sense of possibility, in a moment like that. And it's the sort of thing we overlook because it's so simple. We return over and over again. These practices are so simple. They're not necessarily easy. And one of the ways in which they're consistently not easy is that we have to remember to do them. And we have to have some structure that helps us to remember. And, that's where ritual can really help us, because it blueprints, it like templates in our system. Okay, this is what I do. My body knows to do it. It's a routine that I can count on, I can return to, that I'm used to, that feels familiar when I am, when my mind is clouded by whatever it is that I'm experiencing. So yeah, thank you so much for those two pieces, breath and ritual.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too, when I love all that what we shared, and I feel like they're really palpable, earthy, grounded resources, and just also to share that, when something feels overwhelming, when we don't have the answer, when world is on fire and terrible things are happening in either our loved ones' lives or the world, that we can also just pray to Reiki, just work with Reiki to, shine light, to send Reiki to these areas of the world, to ourselves, to people, and that, we don't have to know to share that. And I feel like I've been in bad places in my life where I really felt the prayers of people who love me and who cared about me kind of coming in and like lifting me up on this really kind of deep inner level. And so, that it also moves mountains. It also moves the world. So we don't have to have the answers. We don't have to have a perfect ritual created. We don't have to be a Reiki master. We don't have to have done all the trainings. We can simply just be open to having something beautiful of life move through us. And
Can I add something to that, Carrie? Because that just reminded me of something that I heard recently. And it was about when we do good things for ourselves, or when we do things for ourselves that, we enjoy, we feel good, right? When we do good things for others, we feel good, and we feel good for a lot longer, right? So if we're not feeling good, doing something for someone else is also a very special thing to do, and can really help us come out of ourselves. And you were just talking about, like, even just sharing your light, just share your light with the world, and see what comes from that, and see what comes back to you from that.
Absolutely. And that'll also bring our attention to what's right in front of us, right? Because who we're going to do something good for is probably going to be somebody in our immediate vicinity. And so that can really be an antidote to that feeling of overwhelm when we're looking at, you know, conditions in the world that we have very little ability to impact. We do have a lot of ability to impact what's happening in our community, what's happening in our family, what's happening with our neighbors. We absolutely have the ability to positively impact the things that are close at hand. And so, yeah, turning towards, where does my, compassion and my desire for joyful interaction like meet a need in my immediate vicinity. That's always a beautiful place to go, and very effective. And I think it's worth mentioning and reminding folks, as you're listening to this, as maybe you're reflecting on your own places of difficulty in your life, those that you are in connection with, perhaps in the world, to reach out for that support. And it's a good place to mention that the three of us all offer a wide range of ways to support you. Bronwen, you've been writing some amazing blogs and then tying that to some amazing class offerings lately. Carrie, you have had some really amazing offerings around nourishing us with Reiki lately. I've got a 21-day practice that's deep diving into the precepts, specifically around navigating grief going into winter coming up. We're always feeling into where are the places that we can bring this practice to you in ways that are creative and responsive to what we're seeing in the world. So I just wanted to name that because this is the time when we really would do well to reach out wherever we need to for support to get through whatever it is that's up for us. So, friends, share with us below what is going on for you, how the system of Reiki has helped you navigate times of difficulty. If you're having a time of difficulty and you need support, please do feel free to reach out to us. And I'll just share one more time that we are participating in the Reiki Raise Healing Summit. We did a talk on women's empowerment and the system of Reiki as part of a multi-day summit with many amazing speakers and practitioners in the Reiki community. That is free to participate as it happens online, and then there's a paid option that allows you to retain those talks into perpetuity, and we will put links on how you can join down below. So thanks so much for being with us. Let us know what you think. We look forward to being with you again next time. And until then, may you be deeply provisioned for all that life is bringing you in these times. Thanks so much. We love you. Goodbye.